Hello and welcome to our next Google Web Design tutorial. In this tutorial I want to create a responsive interactive ad. That's why we need to create a new file with customized dimensions. In this case I select 600 pixels width and 400 pixels height, but it's just for overview. For the publish size we don't go for default, but we go from ad slot size, which means that independent from the stage size, our ad or our size will always be responsive depending on the iframe. So here we are. The first step is that we want to add our file to the project, to our asset library. I've prepared it. There's one image which I named skyscraper, which is kind of a tile. It's 179 pixels width and 134 pixels height. And this will be used as tile for the skyscraper left and right. And then there's the other one, which is a sprite sheet actually, where all the Spiderman frames are included. So we have 11 frames of Spiderman climbing on the right side. We'll have 11 frames of Spiderman climbing on the left side. And then there are 6 frames with Spiderman jumping from left to the right. And with those two images, we want to go now for our project. First of all, we need to create a background. In Google Web Designer, unfortunately, it's not possible having a flexible native background with a gradient. That's why we have to add a background as a div container with our tag tool. Then we go for the whole setting should take place at night. So we take a dark blue gradient to black and then rotate it. We want to have the dark black night at the top and the night blue at the bottom. Finding the right angle. So here we are. And it's important, this top and left position you've seen I've put to 0 pixels and the width and the height is 100 pixels. Now we go for the skyscraper. We want to have our skyscraper always fitting to the 10% on the right of the full viewport size. The div is named skyscraper_right. The left position is 90%, should start from 0 pixel from top. And the width is 10% to cover the last 10% on the right side. And the height is 100%. Now we add the image, the skyscraper tile, by just creating a new class in the CSS files. In this case, I name it .skyscraper and I call the file directly by calling background URL. And the name was skyscraper.ping. So wait a minute. URL and quotes, don't forget the quotes. Skyscraper.ping, end quote. And now we have to add, of course, the path assets dash, and here we are. You can see now on the screen, on the stage directly, the tile is visible. Now we need to do is now, first in the preview, you can see that it covers the whole viewport, 10% to 100%. And now we want to make it scrollable. Now if we scroll it, as it's only 100% height, we need to add the skyscraper tile once more again. In this case, as the tile is 134 pixels high, we just add a container as a subdiv of our skyscraper container. Make it responsive again. So we put it minus 134 pixels, so that's above. And the width is 100% to have it the same width. And the height is 134 pixels. And now we go for the same style. .skyscraper, and as soon as we add it, you can see now that it has been added. Great so far. So unfortunately, it's still not possible to have in Google Web Designer to call or to implement a background image directly. That's why I need to go with the CSS panel. So now let's animate it. It should be an animation from going top down all the time. So finally, Spiderman will climb all the time to the top. So what we're going to do is now we have a keyframe at 1 second, and within the second, to create an eternal scrolling movement, we have to move our skyscraper 134 pixels, which is the size of the tile. If you just only look at a viewport, you can see now that it looks eternally scrolling. Okay. Pause again. So now what we want to do is now we also create a skyscraper left. If we go for the skyscraper left, we don't need to create everything again from scratch, but we just copy by clicking on the skyscraper right, Control C, Control V, and then name it skyscraper underscore left. Put it to the left side. You can see now the tile doesn't make sense because the wall is on the left. We need to put it on the right. That's why we will rotate it now. But first of all, we need to go into the children files, into children containers, because Google Web Designer converts % to pixel size when we copy it. So that's why we need to rename it skyscraper left extended and apply the sizes. Width is 10% for the parent again. Okay, and now we can rotate it by 180 degrees. And so we've created our left container. Now we want to animate it. So but be aware, as now the extension is at the bottom, we need to scroll it from minus 134 pixels to 0 instead of 0 to plus 134 on the right side. We have to create it here the other way around. Let's have a preview. And now you can see both skyscrapers. It's like an endless scroller. And if we change the viewport size, you can see that it will cover always the 10% left and 10% right. Great so far. Now let's go for the Spiderman. For Spiderman, you remember that we've added the Spiderman with several files in one, which is called a sprite sheet. That's why we need to put the sprite sheet component now on the stage. Here we are. We give an idea, which is Spiderman-sprite sheet. So now let's talk about positioning. If we go, first of all, we create the width and the height. The width of Spiderman climbing to the left or right is always 60 pixels, and its height is 183 pixels. That's why we create the size now. Now let's have a look at the asset library for the detailed values that we need to add to our sprite sheet component. So there are 11 frames of Spiderman climbing to the right or to the left, and the viewport, the slice is always 60 pixels by 183. So the offset for climbing on the right is 0 and 0. The offset X and Y is being calculated by the position of in the sprite sheet image. And then the width and the height is the size of Spiderman climbing. Then we go for alignment, means that Spiderman will always be center in this case. And the scaling will be none, means Spiderman will always be 60 pixels by 183. The number of frames is 11, and the duration between each keyframe should be 100 milliseconds. The number of loops is 0. 0 means it will loop internally. If there is a specific number, it will loop once, twice, depending on the value that I give. And then autoplay means that it will start animating at the very beginning. Here we are, Spiderman climbing on the right, and the viewport changes. But you see now that Spiderman is still not responsive. It's always exactly the same position. And this is what we're going to need to fix now. So usually we would animate left and top with percentage to make it responsive. This would be the easiest one. The problem is, especially in mobile devices, if we animate top and left, which is CSS2, then the animation seems to flicker a little bit because it's not GPU accelerated. But we want to go for the best acceleration mode, and that's why we need to do a little trick here. So first of all, we create a parent container, which I name Spiderman, and the size of this container is, it's starting from 10% to the left, and the top is 100%, so we can have it always, let's put the position about minus 250 pixels from the bottom. And with this 80% means that the full container will touch the left and the right skyscraper. And the height is 134 pixels, 183 pixels, which is the size of Spiderman. Now we cut out Spiderman sprite sheet, double click on the parent container, and here we create another container now. So the thing is, because if we create an animation and we need to go for percentage in translation, rotation, and scale. The problem is that all the browsers in CSS3, if you have an object which is 50 pixels in its width and you animate it 100%, it doesn't depend from the parent container, but it depends from the size of its own. Means it's self-related. So if you have a 50 pixels container and you animate it 100 pixels to its right, then it will only move 50 pixels. That's why we've created parent container, which is the full width where we created a width of 80%. And if we animate and put our Spiderman now to the left and to the right, we just need to go for 100% because in the pattern from the sprite sheet size, the parent container spans all the width where we need to interact. Okay, and then you've seen I've created another container, which is because we need to put our Spiderman centralized. You can see it here now. If I have my Spiderman on the left, and you can see that I've put it minus 30 pixels, and now I put my skyscrapers, the right one 30 pixels to the right and left one 30 pixels to the left. And so my Spiderman is always 10% to 90% minus 30 pixels and on the right side plus 30 pixels, which means that my Spiderman will now always touch the surface of the skyscrapers. Now let's go for the animation. We are now in our Spiderman_position container, and now I want to put my Spiderman sprite sheet on the right wall. You can see now if I add a value 100%, it will automatically be replaced by 100 pixels. That's why I change it now to 999 pixels and go for the code view, because on the code view I can go for 100% and it won't be changed. And 999 pixels is easy to find. So change, we have an animation from 0 pixels to 100% to the right and to 0 pixels back. Now let's have a look at the preview in the browser. Moving to the right and moving to the left again. Here we are perfectly. So Spiderman is now able to jump from the left skyscraper to the right. But we want to add some control now. So we also want to animate our sprite sheet. That's why we create a label. Spiderman on the left and Spiderman right. Another label, and then at the end of the animation we create an event where we just simply jump back so that our animation will loop eternally again. I name this Spiderman for eternity. And if I go for the events now, it's a Spiderman target, because this is the full width, and the timeline Spiderman for eternity. And now we call the timeline go to and pause. Should be paused later, to Spiderman left. Okay, this is cool. So let's have a look at the preview. To the left. Okay, nothing has changed. Need to find out what was the show. No, okay, makes sense. It's go to and pause instead of go to and play. Now let's go for the events for the changes of the sprite sheet. We create a new event similar to Spiderman left on the very first second, which I name Spiderman left, similar to the label. And I do exactly the same. I create an event on Spiderman right, and I also call it Spiderman right. And what we want to do now is, this is where Spiderman starts to climb. So this is where we just need to create a new animation on our sprite sheet. That's why on Spiderman left we go for define a new animation, which means this is exactly like the properties panel. Now on the right we can create now a new animation in the configuration of our sprite sheet here. The X offset is still 0. The Y offset, because it's Spider-Man climbing on the left, you remember, was the second row, is 183 pixels, 11 frames, and exactly the same. 100 pixels in duration. Then we go for Spider-Man right, exactly the same here. Spider-Man right, and then go for the sprite sheet, define a new animation. And here, X offset 0, Y offset 0, makes sense. The width is 60 pixels again. The height is 183 pixels again, exactly the same like the left animation. Frames 11, duration 100 milliseconds, and autoplay. Let's have a preview. On the right, he turns, and on the left, he turns again. Okay, cool so far, but the jump animation is still kind of weird. So now we go for the jump animation. That's why we create a new event, where we just create a new, exactly the same like we did before, but with the jumping animation. We call this Spider-Man jumps to right. And on this event, we will just go for the third row with the 6 frames of Spider-Man jumping from left to right. And we do exactly the same, of course, for the jump from right to the left. A new event called Spider-Man jumps to left. And then the new event is again Spider-Man on the timeline. Spider-Man jumps to right. For the sprite sheet, we define a new animation. Now it's important, the offset is 0 again. The Y offset is 366 pixels, which is a double of 183. The width clip is now different. It's 144 by 155. And the frames number is 6, and the duration, let's make it 100 again. Loops should be only jump once, autoplay, and save. And exactly the same for Spider-Man jumps to the left again. So this is cool. You maybe remember that on the image we have 6 frames, but there's a line with 4 frames and a line with 2 frames remaining. And the sprite sheet component finds out if there is enough space in the sprite sheet, if the next frame fits into the row, and if it doesn't, it automatically jumps to the next row. So you can see now, and of course for the jump to the right, we just make the animation reverse. That's why we clicked it on the right side. Okay, on the preview, jumping to the right doesn't look properly, but jump from right to the left makes sense. Okay, there was an issue with the offset on Y. It's not 336, but 366. My issue, sorry. Check and right. Okay, save, preview. Now we have the animation. Jump, climbing, jump back, climbing. Great. Okay, now we go for interaction, which is very, very simple now. So what we need to do now is just create a new event. Oh, wait a minute. No, we have to add an event on Spider-Man right that the animation pauses. Sorry, a little bit confusing here. Okay, here we are. So Spider-Man, because it's already added the label Spider-Man on the left, Spider-Man just pausing the animation, and the same for right. Timeline, Spider-Man on the right, timeline, pause. For target is timeline, configure. Okay, save. And here we are. If we just preview it now, because it's paused, Spider-Man's jumping to the left. And now we want to add some interaction, which is very simple. As I told you before, we just add a tab area on the root stage. Similar to the background, we make it 100% height and width and put it on top left 0 pixels position. And we name it button underscore jump. And now for an event, everything we need to do is now just, if we click this tab area, not for the mouse, we want to have it flexible and responsive, which also means should be mobile first. So we make it touch click event combined. Timeline is just play, Spider-Man, target, save, and that's it. Let's have a look at the preview. Spider-Man is climbing. I press the button, jumping to right, and again. And this is just simply pausing and playing the animation. Oh, okay, there's an issue on the left, so it's not going for eternity. Well, let's have a look at the code view, what has happened, because you remember I had to transform 999 pixels to 100% manually, and now I've added some new keyframes. Google App Designer has done that because of my additional labels and events. That's why I need to go to the code and replace it 3 or 4 times. Click again, now it works. And if you see on the preview that Spiderman is moving all the time with the same, it's just jumping slower in its animation, but it totally fits. It's still responsive and independent from the web view size. And this is how to create responsive interaction within 20 minutes.